Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take these, well, complex lives and huge piles of source material and really boil them down to the knowledge you actually need.
That's the goal.
And today we are plunging into the incredible, chaotic and just fiercely contradictory life of Jack London. He was honestly less a writer and maybe more like a perpetual motion machine of pure, raw experience.
That's a really perfect way to put it, actually. London wasn't just some novelist who sat around writing about adventure. He was the adventurer,
Yeah.
who just happened to write it all down.
Right.
We're looking at a man who, on one hand, romanticized this rugged, blonde beast individualism, the wild north, the high seas, but then simultaneously he was this brutally converted socialist driven by, well, the terror of class struggle he'd seen firsthand.
So our mission today, it goes beyond just the simple biography, doesn't it? We need to cut through these layers of myth. And honestly, a lot of them he built himself to sell books.
Oh, absolutely.
And really sort through the personal memoirs, the hard biographical facts, and his own pretty raw political writings. We're hunting for those visceral experiences that really forged this complex identity.
Yeah, think of him as just a walking contradiction. He became one of the first, global literary celebrities, a guy writing purely for commercial success, just pounding out 1,000 words a day to cover his, frankly, massive spending.
1,000 words a day.
Every day.
Yeah.
But the stuff that came out of that factory routine, The Call of the Wild, The Sea Wolf, White Fang, these became enduring classics. They really shaped American literature, world literature even.
And we've got a lot to work with. We have accounts of his time, his really perilous time up in the frozen Yukon, vivid descriptions of his personality from people who were actually there with him, sailing, starving.
Contemporaries, yeah.
His own incredibly candid stuff on alcohol and politics, and then the spectacular details of that, well, ill-fated global voyage on the Snark. We're going to trace this philosophical shift, from this triumphant, kind of ruthless teenager to a more disillusioned socialist man of the world. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So we start right at the beginning, trying to grasp the turbulent foundation of his identity. He was born John Griffith Cheney, 1876, San Francisco. But his childhood was, well, anything but stable.
Far from it. The sources really show a life of just extreme financial precarity, constant movement.
Yeah, I saw that. Over 10 locations.
In his first 21 years.
Yeah.
Just bouncing around San Francisco, Oakland. This instability meant that from a really young age, survival, it just depended entirely on manual labor.
Yeah.
Started as a newsboy, then quickly into factories.
And that necessity, it seems, bred his initial very fierce philosophy, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He was strong, he was healthy, incredibly capable. And that led him to see the world through this lens of, well, rampant, triumphant individualism. He really embodied that survival of the fittest idea that was popular then.
The whole blonde beast thing?
Exactly. He references Nietzsche's Übermensch, but he calls the blonde beast. He writes about singing the paean of the strong with all my heart. He genuinely believed his superior strength and wit meant he was just destined to be a winner.
And he went out and proved it almost immediately. Quit a factory job, what was it, 10 cents an hour?
10 cents an hour. Yeah, he realized the legal game was just rigged against him. So at 15, he finds a better way to use that strength.
Okay.
Becoming an oyster pirate on the San Francisco Bay.
No, this wasn't just like kids messing around, was it?
No, not at all. This was organized crime. Highly profitable. He quickly bought his own sloop, the Razzle Dazzle, which, by the way, later inspired his book, The Cruise of the Dazzler, and the operation itself. Incredibly dangerous. They were raiding private oyster beds, often protected by armed guards. The sources really emphasized that success depended on absolute silence, sailing into shallow beds in the dead of night.
Any sound.
Yeah, a dropped oar, a loud footstep, anything could echo across the water and just draw rifle fire. Serious risk.
But the payoff, it was staggering, right? Which must have just reinforced that whole individualist idea.
Totally. He often made more money in a single week pirating than he could earn in a whole month slaving away at the cannery. This audacity, outwitting the law, it earned him that legendary title, Prince of the Oyster Pirates. It just validates his entire early worldview. Why toil for pennies when courage and risk bring you independence?
Exactly. It makes perfect sense from his perspective then. The success just fed that arrogance of the blonde beast. He felt superior.
He did. But the culture that celebrated him, that tough waterfront culture, it demanded a price. And that price was alcohol, which he famously personified as John Barleycorn.
Ah, yes. John Barleycorn. His relationship with drinking sounds incredibly complicated.
It really was. London claimed, pretty convincingly I think, that for most of his life, alcohol actually tasted like poison to him.
But he drank relentlessly.
He did. His justification was purely social. He called it the essential payment, for comradeship, for acceptance among those tough working men. It was the entry fee, basically, into the club of real men.
But the mental toll, he wrote about that too, didn't he? With surprising clarity.
Shocking clarity. He observed that John Barleycorn acted as this dangerous inhibitor. Okay, sure, it inhibits morality, makes wrong conduct possible, but for a guy with this intellectual hunger, the bigger problem was it fostered apathy.
Apathy.
Yeah. London watched his own curiosity just dull. He noted the old stings and prods of the spirit were no longer sharp. The whole world, which had seemed so wide open, suddenly felt, in his words, cheap and ordinary.
Wow. And that's where the whole philosophy of the strong man nearly kills the man himself. This turning point wasn't intellectual at all, was it? It was physical. Terrifying.
Absolutely terrifying. Drunk one night, he falls off a sloop, starts drifting out toward the Golden Gate, and for a second, his drunken mind gets seized by this, romantic idea of just letting the current take him out to sea, just letting go.
He describes that scene, right? The vastness, the quiet resignation.
Yeah, but then the freezing water starts pulling him under, and his mind just quickly sobered up. A massive surge of adrenaline hits him, and bam, this visceral realization. He definitely, fiercely wanted to live. He wanted to achieve something beyond the docks and saloons.
That near-death moment, it just reignited his desire for something away and beyond.
Totally. So after a brief, legitimate stint working for the California Fish Patrol.
Trying to go straight.
For a minute, yeah. But his hunger for adventure and, let's be honest, for material led him to the rails. He starts tramping, hoboing, something like 10,000 miles across the U.S. and Canada, sometimes on foot, sometimes joining organized movements like Kelly's Industrial Army, which is part of Coxey's army.
But this journey, moving him from the West, where he said the job hunted the man, into the East, the congested labor centers, this was the test that just shattered his individualism.
Absolutely shattered it. The whole philosophy of the strongman just failed completely when faced with industrial congestion, with surplus labor.
It dropped down into what people then called the submerged tenth. The lowest tier.
Right. And he was expecting, to find weak men, maybe stupid men down there. But he was shocked by who he actually found.
Who was it?
Men who'd once been strong, capable, even blonde beastly like himself. Sailors, soldiers, powerful laborers, all, as he put it, wrenched and distorted and twisted out of shape by toil and hardship and accident, and then just cast aside by the economic machine.
So the system didn't care about strength.
Not a bit. It only cared about utility. Once your utility was gone, the strong man was just as useless, just as disposable as the weak man. And this realization, it wasn't intellectual for him. It was purely visceral, gut level.
And then came the definitive moment, the thing that really sealed it. His arrest in Niagara Falls. For vagrancy.
That was it. Sentenced out of hand, no lawyer, no defense, nothing. 30 days in the Erie County Penitentiary. And he went through this systematic, deliberate dehumanization.
The sources detail it pretty brutally.
They do. Handcuffed, chained to other men, literally part of a chain gang. Head clipped bald, his mustache shaved off, forced into degrading convict stripes. And the final indignity. It's forcibly vaccinated by some bored medical student, marked physically as state property. His individual identity, his strength, meant absolutely nothing in there.
This was the crucible. He said it hammered out his individualism.
And hammered in the terrifying reality of the social pit.
Yeah.
He saw the brutal truth. The harder he worked with his body, the closer he actually got to the bottom of that pit. Because intense manual labor just guaranteed you'd be replaced quickly by the next strong, cheap worker.
And that moment, chained up in prison, that was the catalyst. He swore an oath.
A great oath, right then and there, which he later wrote down. All my days I have worked hard with my body, and according to the number of days I have worked, by just that much am I nearer the bottom of the pit. I shall climb out of the pit, but not by the muscles of my body shall I climb out.
Wow.
And boom, he became a dedicated socialist, not from reading Marx in a library, but from surviving the raw terror of institutionalized class struggle.
That is such a dramatic, powerful pivot. From that moment, he had one goal, escape the social pit, using his mind, his pen.
That was the only way out, he saw.
But first, he needed to survive and gather that final, most essential material for this new career path. And that material was waiting up in the frozen north. Which brings us to the Klondike Gold Rush, 1897.
Yeah, he was only 21, but he saw this as, the chance for an immediate stake. He got completely infected with quandicitis, as they called it, after miners showed up back in San Francisco loaded with gold.
It was like the ultimate test of that old blonde beast mentality, maybe. But now with this new knowledge that sheer physical effort wasn't the whole story.
Exactly. It was a means to an intellectual end now. He managed to get the financing through his half-sister Eliza, who actually mortgaged her home to outfit him. Incredible devotion.
And the supplies needed were immense, right? A ton of equipment.
About a ton, yeah, to meet the Canadian requirement for a year's food. He started the trek with his brother-in-law, James Shepherd. Shepherd lasted maybe 2 days before turning back. Couldn't handle the agonizing, repetitive packing over the pass.
The Chilkoot ordeal. It sounds like a logistical nightmare.
And a physical one. To move that ton of supplies, if you're carrying, say, 100 pounds, you have to make 20 round trips just to gain 1 single mile of ground.
20 trips per mile.
Scaling mountains in treacherous conditions, relying purely on your body to move this massive weight. And the danger was absolutely real. We know 65 men died in one avalanche on the Chilkoot in April '98. Others drowned, just pulled down by the weight of their packs crossing rivers on slippery logs.
And once they got over the Chilkoot, they had to race to build boats.
Yeah, build boats quickly to navigate 500 miles of river before the Yukon froze solid. London, with his Oyster Pirate and sailing experience, he took charge of their 27-foot spruce boat. Navigated terrifying rapids like Box Canyon, White Horse Rapid.
People watched. Placed bets.
Hundreds sometimes, yeah. Betting on who'd capsize. And, showing that irrationally generous side Hargreave mentioned later, London even risked going back through the rapids to help a young couple who were struggling.
But the Arctic, it eventually won, didn't it?
It always wins, eventually. Winter caught them. London spent the season crammed into a tiny 10 by 12 cabin on the Stewart River with partners. The cold was just unimaginable. Reports say consistently near 70 below zero.
70 below.
Yeah. Even with the stove burning red hot, meat would stay frozen solid just 8 feet away. They ended up burning bacon grease for light when the candles ran out. Just a dark, isolating existence.
And the physical toll was devastating. Scurvy.
Scurvy, which the miners grimly called Arctic leprosy. And this wasn't just, needing some vitamin C. It was excruciating. Internal bleeding, teeth loosening. It ultimately almost completely crippled him from the waist down. Inflamed, painful joints. So much for the strong, blonde beast body. It just betrayed him, reduced him to a helpless invalid by the environment itself.
So by May 1898, he was done with mining. Obvious.
Totally finished. Too weak to walk properly. Yet somehow, he managed to row 1,500 river miles, severely weakened, until he reached St. Michael's, Alaska.
1,500 miles.
Yep.
Rowing.
Desperate for passage south, he immediately got a job shoveling coal on a steamship heading back to San Francisco. His journal entry about leaving St. Michael's is famously short. Unregrettable moment.
Unregrettable moment. He left with what, $4 worth of gold?
$4.50 worth. A complete, total, comprehensive physical failure in terms of finding gold.
It's the ultimate contradiction, though, isn't it? He fails spectacularly at finding wealth, comes home broke, and yet he later says, "It was in the Klondike that I found myself." There you get your perspective.
Exactly. No money, but his mind, his notebook, was just stuffed with literary gold.
That experience transformed his whole perception of suffering.
It absolutely did. He spent 6 weeks in Dawson City, not really mining, but just listening. In the saloons, in the cabins, absorbing these incredible tales from the sourdoughs, the old-timers. He soaked up material for, over 80 fictional works set in the far north, turning that raw human experience into stories he'd sell.
And we can trace the actual lineage of his best stuff right back to this time. Like Buck, in The Call of the Wild, he wasn't just some made-up dog.
No. He was based on Marshall Bond's 140-pound St. Bernard Scotch collie mix, also named Jack, that London befriended in Dawson.
And that horrifying detail in To Build a Fire, the guy falling through the ice.
Drawn directly from a real-life near disaster involving a Catholic priest, Father Judge, whom London knew personally up there. He was a master at leveraging real life.
But this is also where we see him shaping things, right?
Yeah.
Prioritizing the narrative over pure history, choosing struggle, choosing loss.
Definitely. He knew what resonated with readers, and probably with his own view of life's cruelty by then. He often chose the narrative of inevitable struggle or tragic loss.
Can you give us an example of that shaping of reality?
Sure. Look at his story, The 1,000 Dozen. A man tries to bring eggs to Dawson. They spoil. He's financially ruined. Classic London failure narrative.
Right. Man versus nature, nature wins.
Exactly. But Historically, there was a guy, Charles E. Vest, who actually froze 4,000 dozen eggs, shipped them up, sold them for an insane $3 a dozen, and made an absolute fortune.
Wow. So London ignored the success story.
He chose to write the story of failure and loss because it fit his central theme. Man versus nature often ends in crushing defeat, something he'd felt firsthand. Success, for London the writer, was often less compelling than sheer survival or failure.
That really reframes his whole output, doesn't it? He wasn't just writing adventure stories. There were cautionary tales, fueled by the prison, by the Yukon, about the limits of just physical strength in a world that doesn't really care.
Precisely.
Okay, moving on from the Klondike, which gave him his material, let's look at the man himself. Before, his health started to decline, we've got this incredible snapshot from W.B. Hargrave, who knew him in 1897. It paints this picture of manliness, but it seems like a balance between the adventurer and the thinker.
It's a fantastic description. Hargrave said London had the mental equipment of a mature man, but combined it with the clean, joyous, tender, unembittered heart of youth. He wasn't just reckless, he was an idealist who went after what was actually attainable. A dreamer, sure, but also a man among strong men.
I love the specifics Hargrave uses. He talks about a body that was lithe and strong, handsome features, a sensitive mouth, but lips that could set in masterful lines. He faced life with superb assurance, could face death serenely imperturbable. It's the archetype, isn't it? The outdoor man. In short, a real man, a man's man.
Absolutely the archetype. And yet Hargrave makes it clear that underneath that confident exterior was this moral engine, driven by intellectual need. He explicitly said London was intrinsically kind, irrationally generous even, but he applied this single fierce test to everything, religion, economics, whatever. What is the truth and what is just? That craving for truth and justice, that's what fueled the socialism, even while he looked like the individualist hero his readers wanted.
And he wasted no time putting that intellect to work after the Klondike. We saw The Spark early, that first published story, a typhoon off the coast of Japan, based on his sailing days. Won a prize when he was just 17, beat out Stanford and Berkeley students.
Yeah, showed the raw talent was there. But coming back from the Klondike, the road was still tough. He was literally flat broke. Had to pawn his bicycle just to buy stamps to mail manuscripts.
Pawned his bike for stamps.
Yeah.
That's dedication. Or desperation.
Bit of both, probably.
Yeah.
He was so desperate he even took the civil service exam to be a postman, convinced writing might fail. But then his story, To the Man on the Trail, finally hit in 1899.
And once that engine caught, it just never stopped, did
Yeah.
it? He was famously dedicated to the word factory.
Absolutely. A brutal industrial writing routine. 1,000 words a day, 7 days a week. Didn't matter if he was hungover, sick, traveling, just relentless. And that dedication, it propelled him to this massive, almost unprecedented commercial success.
He basically became the world's first celebrity author, right? Financial independence just from writing.
Pretty much. Within just a few years of starting, he was earning an astonishing $10,000 a month, which back then was, well, a fortune, equivalent to hundreds of thousands today. Books, stories, speaking tours. He definitely achieved that goal of escaping the social pit. He didn't just climb out, he rocketed over it.
And the big turning point, obviously, The Call of the Wild, 1903. Immediate, massive success, international stardom, practically overnight.
Huge. Changed everything for him.
But there's that stunning financial detail tied to it.
Yes. The fact that despite the book's massive, instant, enduring global success, I mean, it's been filmed like 9 times, never been out of print, London sold the full rights to Macmillan for a flat $2,000.
$2,000. For The Call of the Wild, he never got any royalties.
Not a single penny. Forfeited what would have been millions in modern terms.
That seems like such a terrible decision, especially for a guy so driven by money. Why? Why did he do that?
Well, that's that core tension again, isn't it? Between sort of financial sense in the long term and immediate celebrity commerce. As he told Charmian later, he had no kick, no complaints. He saw it as the game.
The game.
Yeah. Macmillan's aggressive promotion of the book, which they could do because they owned it outright, it instantly transformed him. He went from being a successful writer to a globally recognized author. He basically traded future, slow-trickling wealth for immediate, massive fame.
So the fame itself was the currency?
Exactly. Fame he could then leverage for higher speaking fees, more demand for short stories, huge advances for his next books. He used the fame from Call the Wild to generate even more money later, that $2,000 fee. It's like a necessary business investment in building the Jack London brand.
Wow. That's actually a really modern way of thinking about it. Investing in your own brand, prioritizing notoriety.
Huh. Yeah, pretty shrewd in its own way.
Now, his personal life was just as dynamic, just as turbulent as everything else. We have that complicated start with Anna Strunsky, met her at a socialist Labor Party event.
Right. She was an intellectual, a romantic idealist, and she saw him as this, like, platonic ideal of man, the perfect blend of the athlete's body and the revolutionary thinker's mind.
Their connection sounds intense, intellectual, emotional. They even wrote a book together.
They did. The Kempton Waste Letters. It's this fascinating debate in letters about philosophical pragmatism versus romantic idealism. Anna was really integrated into his life, working alongside him, which didn't sit well eventually with his first wife, Bessie.
But there was that pivotal moment, wasn't there? He almost proposed to Anna.
He did. 4 months into their friendship, they're walking together, having this really profound, close moment. He hesitated, just for a second, apparently, but long enough for Anna to kind of deflect, mentioning she wanted to go to Russia for the revolution. The intensity broke. The moment passed.
And 4 days later.
4 days later, Jack London, maybe just restless or needing grounding, asked his friend Bessie Mattern to marry him, just like that, dramatically changing his domestic life.
But that marriage didn't last long either. It was turbulent.
Very. He was just a man of immense restlessness. By 1903, deeply dissatisfied, he started a very public relationship with Charmian Kittredge, who was actually related to Bessie's family.
Ouch.
Yeah. He eventually left Bessie, and literally 2 days after the divorce was finalized in November 1905, he married Charmian. She really became his true partner in adventure.
And with Charmian, he launched what was supposed to be the ultimate statement of his life, right? This grand, self-financed adventure in 1907, circumnavigating the world on his custom yacht, the Snark.
The Snark. Named after the Lewis Carroll nonsense poem creature, maybe kind of acknowledging the potential folly of it all.
Could be. It was meant to last 7 years, take them around the globe. But the voyage was marked by these almost catastrophic mistakes, nearly ended their lives early on, again, proving that sheer grit isn't enough against technical incompetence or just bad luck.
The first big mistake was all about navigation.
Right. London, the proud, self-taught guy, he trusted Charmian's uncle, Roscoe Ames, to navigate.
Big mistake. London quickly realized, once they were way out of sight of land, heading for Hawaii, that Eames simply couldn't handle the complex calculations needed for celestial sighting on the open ocean.
And the stakes there were huge. Life and death.
Literally. Celestial navigation needs complex, precise math with the sextant and chronometer. Get the angle of the sun or stars wrong by just a tiny bit, and you miss a small target like Hawaii by hundreds of miles. Miss Hawaii in the middle of the Pacific.
You're done. They only had enough water for the expected trip time.
Exactly. So the pressure forced London back onto that mental muscle he'd sworn to use. He'd just plunged into the navigation books they had on board, studied the theory furiously while they were sailing, put it into practice daily, correcting Eames's errors. It was a race against dehydration, against the sheer vastness of the Pacific.
And he pulled it off. Landed safely in Honolulu.
He did. Mastering this complex scientific skill mid-voyage under that kind of duress, it just proves his exceptional capacity for self-teaching and survival.
But then came the second major mistake, which sounds even more foolish, almost arrogant.
It kind of was. Happened sailing from Hawaii towards the Marquesas Islands. London, who, had this history of disregarding formal rules. He just neglected to read the official sailing directions for the South Pacific Ocean.
Much warned against.
Warned mariners not to head too far south too early in the year. He basically ignored the instructions.
And the result?
Steered the Snark right into the doldrums, the intertropical convergence zone, an area notorious for totally unpredictable winds. Often just complete dead calm. They just sat there, stationary, bobbing under the intense tropical sun, unable to move except drift with the currents.
And things got worse. They lost water.
Yeah, discovered they had lost over half the remaining fresh water. Leak, accident, who knows. Friends back home started getting terrified. The New York Times reported them about a month overdue at the Marquesas. They were just alone out there, stuck, running out of water.
But they made it.
Eventually, yeah. Caught the trade winds finally, made it to the Marquesas, overcame these crises through, sheer luck and London's quick thinking again. But the big dream, the circumnavigation, it was ultimately cut short in Sydney, Australia.
Why Sydney? What happened?
London spent 5 weeks in the hospital there, suffering terribly from some severe, mysterious tropical illness. Probably a nasty combination of infections, maybe Yaw's disease. It afflicted his hands, his body with lesions and pain. He just pushed his body too hard, too often, for too long. He and Charmian finally gave up, returned home by commercial ship, leaving the crippled Snark behind.
So despite the Snark voyage ending early, he just kept writing, relentlessly.
Never stopped. Kept up that prolific routine. Ended up with 23 novels, hundreds of stories, drawing material from his travels as a war correspondent, Russo-Japanese War, Mexican Revolution, and from his time in Hawaii, the South Pacific.
And he poured all that money into his final vision, right? Wolf House.
Wolf House, his massive, meticulously planned 15,000-square-foot mansion, built from native stone and redwood in Sonoma, California. This was meant to be it. His castle, his statement that he'd finally conquered the social pit, found real stability.
And then, the final agonizing irony.
Yeah, in just a massive, tragic twist of fate, Wolf House burned to the ground just before they were supposed to move in.
Destroyed by fire. His great physical statement of permanence just annihilated, left him permanently restless, maybe?
Seems likely. London died prematurely in 1916, only 40 years old. The cause itself is disputed, kind of reflecting his tumultuous life. Theories range from uremia, kidney failure definitely made worse by his lifelong battle with John Barleycorn.
Or possibly suicide.
Or a possible deliberate overdose of morphine, yeah.
We'll likely never know for sure.
But regardless of how he died, his legacy is just immense, even if some American critics back then dismissed him as a popular hack writing adventure stories about dogs. His international status was always high. And that clean, powerful, plain style he used, the universal archetypes, the social meanings hidden beneath the action. It influenced literary giants everywhere. Hemingway, Borges.
And now scholarship is catching up, right? Reclaiming his reputation here.
Absolutely. There's a real resurgence. People are finally recognizing him in his home country as a major foundational author. He used his life as this incredible laboratory, and the results, the triumphs and the failures, they became his enduring novels.
What an extraordinary, absolutely exhausting life. We started with this chaotic kid, John Griffith Cheney, the oyster pirate, quitting the factory floor over wage injustice. And we end with the legacy of Jack London, this pioneering global celebrity, a man who really lived the adventure, the struggle, the social failure before he ever put it on paper.
Yeah, that core tension was always there, wasn't it? Between the visceral, physical need for adventure, it was just in his blood, and the intellectual necessity of escaping that physical labor system, the fear it would drag him back into the social pit. He really did successfully use his mind, his prolific pen, as his only way out. His whole life story is kind of a monument to the idea that knowledge, honed through relentless, often brutal experience and self-analysis, is the ultimate tool for survival, for advancement.
And that leaves us with this final thought, something for you to maybe chew on. Jack London was constantly seeking truth, seeking justice. Yet his most famous fiction often romanticized the very brutality of nature, the very struggle he fought so hard to escape in his own life. If he were alive today, given that early conviction about the failure of manual labor and the power of the mind, would he be championing AI, championing mental work, or would he just look at our digital world and see that the social pit hasn't disappeared, it's just been digitized?